All right, so sitting here in quarantine in my basement, I still got couple more days to go, and I see this figure running outside out here. My friend Zach came and dropped something off at my door. Can't have contact with people and social distancing and whatnot. And this is what he left me. This is what he left. He iced me in quarantine. Appreciate it. Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Instagram. Why don't you let me use the full crop of my photo? Because you kill me when you don't. Today what we'll be doing is a quick little editing tutorial of how I edited this shot, which was mostly this shot, and due to Instagram's crop ratio I had to cut it down, unfortunately. And I was super bummed about that because for the first time in quite some time I took a shot that I actually really liked. My cousin and I went to Macquarie National Park, Macquarie Park Pass. We went to a waterfall, and I soon realized exactly what I wanted to shoot. I knew that my lens was gonna be kind of wide enough to get the foreground and the top that I wanted in there, but not quite wide enough. So I just went for it anyway. Basically what I saw was this break of light in the trees, and I knew that I could use this one technique that I use in Photoshop almost all the time on a lot of photos, and that's what I'll be going over sort of today, and that's kind of the whole purpose of this video. It's just a little secret, not so secret at all trick that I use pretty often. I'll show you the screen and I'll just go through the whole edit with you, and then once we get into Photoshop I'll really explain why I do what I do. Alright, so here is the original photo that I took. My main goal was to have a little bit of foreground with these leaves here. Sacrificed my face into a couple of spider webs, which was terrifying. And then the other main focus was going to be up top here, where the light's kind of leaking through the top of the forest, and then obviously on my subject, which is my cousin kind of walking up and immersing himself in the scene with the waterfall. So it's a very wet, rich, deep kind of scene, and I wanted to kind of keep it that way. So what I did that I don't typically do is I go into my presets that basically mean nothing, because I make a new preset almost every time I edit a photo, and I found one that I kind of sort of liked that wasn't too deep. This one, Midday People, worked on a shot of a person once, so that's why it's named that. I don't know. I have no rhyme or reason. Anyway, it was still a little bit too warm for me, but I wanted to keep the warmth sort of in the rocks, and then keep the rich, deep, lush greens in obviously the trees and the leaves and whatnot. So I think what I did is I just made it warmer there. I know I made it a little bit brighter, and then gotta fix that because I don't like 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, increments of 5. So if you want, you can take a look at the basic panel that I did here. Temperature 6000, tint plus 15, plus 0.8 for exposure, minus 70 for the highlights, just to kill a bit of that, the top part right there. Plus 40 to bring out a little bit in the shadows, just so it wasn't too dark. Brought up the blacks a little bit, and then I just sort of left the whites as they are, because if I go start bringing it up, it's going to bring it up too much, and I didn't really want it. So I just sort of left it. Clarity, plus 20, just gives it a little bit of texture, a little bit of crunch, and then I kind of dumbed down the saturation on the image overall. Here I've got my sort of basic curve. You can see I lifted the blacks a little bit to give it a bit of film look to it that a lot of people go with, and I tend to go with because I really like it. Moving on to just a mess. Look at this. We got a 79, this 21, the 31. what am I doing? So what I know for sure is that I want the greens to be a little more lush and a little more deep. So I'm going to take them back out of the sort of the yellows and back more into the greens and aqua section. Let's go plus 20, and that is, that's deep. It's good enough for me. I know I want everything to pop a little bit more, so I'm just gonna bring everything sort of up. And so for Lightroom, I think the last thing I'm gonna do is grab a radial filter over here, and it's gonna end up being custom. So what we're gonna do is I'm just gonna put it around my cousin here. We'll go invert so that it's on him. We'll feather it pretty good so that you don't get any, because if you don't feather it and you start making changes to it, even if they're very subtle, you're going to get this. You get this weird outline. So if you want to brighten your subject, darken your subject, make them a little bit sharper, whatever it may be, just make sure you kind of go into the feather effect there. And then you'll see that it's not as much of an obvious sort of oval and circle or whatever you've got going on there. And it does make a pretty good difference. Maybe a little too much on the exposure there. All right, so that just sort of makes him pop a little bit, and then you can't really tell that there's sort of anything done drastically there. So the last part, which is the most important part, is you're going to take your photo, edit in Adobe Photoshop, whatever version you got going on, and then you're going to wait probably at least 5 years for that to load. I could probably walk back to Alberta in this time. Like, it takes a long time. Done. Perfect. That wasn't terrible. I mean, my laptop's a bit out of date, but that's all right. Anyway, now that we're in Photoshop, it's really just a couple of simple things to finish this photo off. So first thing you're going to do is you're going to bring in a new layer. You're going to take the paint paint bucket, dump a bunch of black paint in there and just cover the whole thing. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to go to filter, you're going to go to render lens flare, and it's going to bring in this bright flash, which is what I was thinking about when I shot the image originally, when I saw that open space above the waterfall, and had a feeling that I could create this sort of ethereal look. Extremely delicate and light in a way that seems too perfect. Sure, well, ethereal. This ethereal, like, dreamy look. I guess I could have just said dreamy. Anyway, you're going to press OK, and now you're going to have this lens flare sort of sitting here. What I like to do, depending on the scene, time of day, where it's sitting in your scene, is I'll go over to create new fill or adjustment layer. I'll go to hue and saturation, tab that so that it only affects what's directly below it, which would be this layer with the lens flare. And then you're just going to go colorize, and depending on what color you're looking for, you can mess around with that. I'm going to go for a bit of an orange. We'll desaturate it, and then you can sort of mess around with the brightness. I don't typically mess around with that because then it creates some weird lines that you have to get rid of. But for now, that's what we'll do. Then all you're going to do is go over to here. You're going to go to screen, change it so you can move it around. You're going to place it up top in here. And then once it's set where it's supposed to be, you can just click on the layer. You're going to add a layer mask. Go over to this paintbrush. Make sure it's on, like, the main color is on black. make it a little bit bigger, and then you see these lines sort of here, and this one's a little harder to see. All you're going to do is you're going to have the opacity on 100, and you're going to use the edge of the brush to paint out the lines, and then you kind of get there. And then what I do is I'll typically drop the opacity to like 40% and then make it even bigger, and then kind of like hit the edges of the scene just a little bit, just so that it's not overkill and glaring. And then I might even go 10, nope, okay. I might even go 10%, run through the scene once, or run through the layer. So it's kind of just like, just there a bit. Then I'll click on the main layer. I'll go to dodge. If you're not sure what these are, dodge brightens, burn darkens, and sponge saturates. So dodge tool, you can brighten the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. Same for burn, you can darken the highlights, the midtones, and the shadows. So highlights, anywhere from maybe 3 to 5, depending on what you're going for. Paint it over a bit more, so you can see that I just kind of like branched it out a little bit, so it's a little more, pops a little bit more. Then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to merge the layers, Command J, at least on the Mac it is, to create another layer. And then you're going to go filter, blur, Gaussian. This blur, I typically leave it at just 30 pixels. Some people, I've heard, change it based off the megapixels of your camera. I just go with 30. Press OK. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to go to Image, Adjustments. Right now you got your brightest part of your image and your darkest part of your image. They're kind of like, they're in that quarantine life right now. And like, hopefully we're going to get back down to being like all up in each other's grills. But for now, you're going to keep it at the quarantine distance, and then just bring it in for like, say you're like social distancing, you know, that's what you're gonna give it. The social distancing sort of feels like you're still keeping apart, but like you're getting closer, but like you're not quite touching. And then like hopefully one day you're gonna be, you know, but for now just keep your distance. And then you press OK. Go to your opacity, you press 10. It's a little glowy, maybe 7, and then you can see it's just a subtle glow. Now I don't do this on every single photo, but a lot of photos I will add this lens flare and that Gaussian blur to make it like that dreamy look. That's just a look that I prefer, that I like. It's not for everybody. And then what I'll do, I'll create a layer mask on that awful layer. This one right here. This one. I'll click on that layer, and then I will go to that tool again, bring the opacity back up to 100, and then I just paint over my subject. It can be rough, doesn't really matter. And all that's gonna do is, you'll see like over here, that's just gonna bring the subject back from the original layer. So there's not gonna be any glow on your subject, but it doesn't really matter. This one, since it's a re-edit, I think I overkilled it a little bit to what I had originally, but it's whatever. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna back out, save, and then because it's gonna go on Instagram, all you're gonna do is go to crop 4x5, and I'm kind of just leaving it sort of in the middle there so that I get a bunch of that foreground and then a bit of that glow from the top. And that's sort of it. That's really all I did for that photo. Like I said, I wish Instagram let me have the whole shot in there so that I could have most of that in there, that kind of bright glow. Like I said, it's a little bit much. I probably went overkill on it while I was doing this edit, but anyway, that's it for that. All right, so that's going to be it for today's video. Sort of just a quick little process that I do on a bunch of photos, and the main focus was really that Photoshop technique where you just add in the lens flare, paint it in, blend it a little bit, and then you add the blur if you'd like. It's like I said, it's just a look that I like to add to some of my images, not all of them. I recently stopped doing it a lot more and more, but there are instances like that waterfall shot where I think it just works and can kind of look cool here and there. So that's what I do. If there's anything unclear, first time making one of these editing videos, so don't be too bummed out. If you have any questions, just leave a comment and I'll be more than happy to answer it. As you can tell, I'm not a pro editor, but I don't just take sliders and just slide. There is a method to my madness, believe it or not. It may not look like it, but it makes sense, at least in my head. I look forward to making more sorts of these videos in the future. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Make sure you leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that good stuff. You can hit the bell thing if you want. I don't know. I'm new. Anyway, that's it. See you later.